Okay, so in the previous tutorial, we had a look at for loops, while loop, and a bit of the range. So right now we are going to look at range again. So let's say, for example, I wanted to use my range. I want to use the start, stop, and step in a program. Well, right now, what we're going to do is we're going to try and run a loop that steps in twos. I've already showed you that example. So this is how we will write it. So for I in range, and then I start off with, okay, maybe I want to start off with where should it start? Okay, start from 2, and then where should it stop? Stop at 11, and then step in 2. So we'll end up with this. So let us run it, and then you'll be able to see. So you can see here that it starts off in 2, and then it goes up in 2. So we end up with 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. It will never add the stop part to it. Okay, so that is how you look at the range. So we can do this and do it. We can also, right, start off, for example, let's say we wanted to loop that count down, for example. So we can change our code to something like this. Start from 10 and then end at 0, but take 1 or maybe take 2 each time you're looping down. In this case, what we've done is we've just swapped our code around. So we'll end up with something like this. We end up with 10, 8, 6, 4, 2. And this is how you use your range in loops that count down. Now, these are seen in timers, games, simulations, or progress indicators. The loop begins at 10 and ends just before 0 because the stop value is excluded. So by using -2, well, the sequence moves in reverse. Now, let's say, for example, we wanted to also use our loop to traverse a string. This is also possible. Remember, strings are sequences, so loops can visit each, well, we can each character at a time. So let's say, for example, we had for I in Emmanuel, for example. Okay, and then what we can do is this loop will look at each of these as its own. So when we print it out, it will print out Emmanuel. So that's how you're able to use a loop to traverse a string. This is actually quite important or useful when you're doing text analysis. Here, in this case, we don't actually use range. In this case, unlike numbers in range, the length of the string will determines how many times the loop executes. So this is how you use a loop in this particular instance. Okay, great. So now you should have a basic understanding of what a loop um, should work. I think it's quite important that you practice quite a lot with this. Now let's use this in a real scenario, for example. So let's say we wanted to create a Python program, and we're going to combine loops with user input, for example. So we'll end up with using. So let's say, for example, remember in the previous tutorials, we've actually got videos on user input. So in case you are struggling with user input, I would advise you to try and watch one of my previous videos. So let's say, for example, we wanted the user to keep typing in something until they actually click on the word quit. Okay, so we'll do something like this. User underscore input equals empty string. Okay, so while the user input, okay, is not equals to quit, for example, okay, we would, this is what we end up with. So first of all, we start off with user input equals an empty string, because when we start off, the user has not entered anything yet. And while the user underscore input is not equals to quit, okay, we want the user to keep entering something. If they don't enter quit, it will never ever stop. Okay, so let's do something like this. So can you see here, as soon as you run it, it says enter. Okay, maybe I should change it spelling correctly. Cool. Enter. Great. So we're gonna enter Emmanuel. It will run again. Enter, quit to exit the loop. I'm gonna write Kofi. Enter, quit to exit the loop. It will keep asking me this until I actually enter, quit, and then the program comes out. Okay, so it's quite important to understand how to use loops. And now this is usually used for games, for example, or to force users into entering something inside their program. So that is how you actually use um, loops in a program. Now, I wanted us to have a look at something else. So in the next video, I want to show you all how to use, actually, we can actually combine it together. Okay, so let's combine it together and look at if and else statements. Okay. Now, remember, if statements is literally it's a simplest form of decision making. Think of it as you're developing an app and you want to make sure that some conditions are checked. Okay. So let's say, for example, um, you we want to check whether 100 is actually 100. I think yeah, we want to check if 100 is actually 100. So let's say, for example, we had a score equals 100. For example, now with an if statement, the code inside our if statement only runs if the condition is true. So in this case, we have a score equals 100. This is a normal variable. And we want to check if the score is greater or equals to 90, right? We want to print grade A. Now, when we run our code, it will print out grade A. The reason why it printed out grade A was because score is greater or equals to 90. Because remember, score is basically 100 in this case. So it just if statement just makes a decision for you. Okay. Now, one way if statements are often used for validation, where, for example, an action should only occur in certain cases. So in this particular example, we're just checking if score is greater or equals to 100. Now, another if statement that we can have is an if and else statement, because if you're going to have an if, then you definitely need to have an else. It's like asking somebody, okay, I have two options. You either would like some um, let's say KFC, or you prefer McDonald's. In this particular example, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to show you how to use an if and else statement. Now, we already have our if statement. Okay, so now let's move on to our else statement. So if the score is greater or equals to 90, else, okay, else we will just print out grade. We'll just print out grade B. So what this code here would do is, if score is greater or equals to 90, it will print out grade A. Else it's not 90. So that means that the grade is going to be a B. So if I run this, we're still going to get an A because our score is actually 100. Okay, and 100 is greater than or equals to 90. So the else is basically, if the if doesn't meet its condition, then it has to be an else. So if the condition is true, the first block runs. Otherwise, the else block runs instead. Now then we have another one where we, instead of having an if and else, we can also have an else if. So let's say, for example, in this example we have A and B. But maybe the scenario may be that we may need to actually give student grades between a certain range. So for example, we may say that, okay, let's think of a real life scenario where we may have 70 is A, greater or 70 is an A, and then maybe we may want to give somebody 60, which may be a B, and then a D, and then maybe a C as well. So how would we run our code like this? Well, I'll start again. We would do if the score, right, is greater or equals 70. Okay, we're not going to say your pass, we're going to say A. Okay, else if, okay, if the score is greater or equals to 60, we can say B. Else if the score is greater or equals to 50, we can say grade equals C. Else if the score is greater or equals to D, we can say, well, greater or equals to 40, we can say print D. And then we will have print F. So this is how you use this elif here. Right now, I want to show you all something. So what you have here is if the score is greater or equals to 70, the person gets an A. But let's put 50 here, for example. You'd see that the person ends up getting C. Now you use else if in this particular case. But what we can also do is we can do you can change it, you can make modifications to it, you can use it for whatever you want to use it. So that's how you use an else if. Okay, so if will basically give you other conditions that you can use, and else if will tell, okay, if it doesn't meet this, then let's do this. If it doesn't meet this, then let's do this. If it doesn't meet this, then let's do this. And that is how you use an if and else if. And I will see you in the next video.